freight efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and friends.
Here in episode 92, we're joined by John Hroncich. He's Director of North American Transit Sales at BAE Systems, where we talk about what BAE Systems does, how transit has been ahead of trucking in terms of trying new technologies, and we walk through the various alternative fuel options in the bus market. He also shares why the voice of the customer is so important and encourages people in the trucking industry to be open-minded when it comes to powertrain options. Today, I'm real pleased to have joining us John Hroncich. He's Director of North American Transit Sales at BAE Systems. Great to have you on today, John. I'm looking forward to this.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Me too.
Yeah, so John and I go back a good ways. I'm going to challenge John to tell us when we first met. Pretty long-time friends, John.
It is going back a few years. I want to say it was 2008, maybe 2009. We were both at a industry event. I remember it was in Atlanta. I think we were both in relatively new roles, right? I was new to BAE Systems, and I think you were relatively new to what you're doing now. And I think for the first time in human history, two men simultaneously asked each other for directions at the same time. That fortunately, Letty, your wife, was around, and we were trying to find where to go for the event we were attending. They were having a reception, and that's how we met. I think we were lost together.
Yeah, you sure got that right, and we were lost together. That's exactly how we became friends. And you could have been I could have been a janitor, and you could have been a plumber, and we were no different. But you're right. And so it was, you knew more about what you were going to do than me. I just recently left Navistar. I thought I wanted to stay in the industry, and I'm pretty sure it was a CalStart H-Tup event back in the day where we were together in Atlanta. And I really valued the work that you and BAE's done. I did some private consulting with you as NACFE was getting going and BAE. So we'll get into that some, but BAE's been around the trucking industry, but probably very few of us know anything about you. So give us both the elevator speech on who BAE Systems is, John, and then maybe the extended version as to why people on this podcast would be interested.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So BAE Systems is a global Fortune 500 aerospace and defense company, really a technology company at heart. The sector I work in, and the company's broken up into different sectors, it's called electronic systems. And as you would think by the name, right, its focus is on systems integration, and electronic controls, software development, electric machine control across a wide range of platforms. And the business I'm in, which is in the electronic systems sector, is called Power and Propulsion Solutions. Our history or heritage goes back almost 30 years. We really evolved out of our company's defense and commercial avionics business, where BAE Systems has been controlling aircraft engines and everything from the cockpit to the tail of helicopters, commercial aircraft, and military aircraft for years. We took that and we moved into the transportation sector, predominantly the transit bus market back in the 90s. We developed a fully integrated drivetrain with an electric motor, batteries, system software, power inverters, and we deliver it to bus manufacturers. And like Mike said, back when we first met, we were looking at the truck market, right? So BAE had a cursory involvement with early super truck programs. Some of the work we did with Mike was around a parallel electric drive system that we've developed. Since then, we've put over 18,000 propulsion systems into service, again, mostly in the transit bus market, but we're delving into military applications, maritime applications, and now the truck market.
What brought you here to this work, and what's kept you at BAE for now, like you said, 16, 17 years? I mean, what's kept you here? Well, what's exciting about your work? But tell us about your whole career.
I was in the Navy. I went to college at University of Rochester. I was a history major. And then in the Navy's infinite wisdom, they made me an engineer, which was like kind of round peg in a square hole kind of thing for a while. But they forced me into it, and I got my qualifications. So I came out with a little bit more technical background than I had going in. And then I worked at a company called Corning Incorporated in upstate New York. After my service, I settled in what's known as the southern tier of New York. So I worked at Corning for 8 years, and that's really where I got into clean transportation solutions. Corning long developed the catalytic converter substrates that go into automobiles. And just when I got there, we were looking at the diesel truck market, and diesel particular filters is a core product of Corning. So I was part of that program to commercialize that technology. So I got into trucks and clean transportation and some of the problems that the industry has in bringing on new technologies and trying to figure out what to charge for it and how to make a buck on it. So that really kind of got me into the clean transportation sector. And then back in 2008, just a few months before I met you, Mike, I joined BAE Systems, who again was just starting to look at what can we do with this drivetrain that we've developed for transit, and maybe look at other applications. And so BAE Systems, being primarily an aerospace defense company, really was keeping their eyes wide open on what the needs of the industry were. And that's frankly how you and I got together and did some really work together.
Yeah. So let's dive into the transit. I mean, you're responsible now for BAE's transit business. It's been a pretty, big part of BAE for a long time. But as we're looking at electrifying heavy trucks, medium and heavy trucks, oftentimes people say, well, the beachhead or the early adopting segments, transit, whether you're talking China or the US or anywhere. I mean, China transit buses, city buses have gone through hybrids and electrification, even natural gas, et cetera. But so tell us, what is it about that? Tell us about the transit bus market. Maybe focus on the U.S. and Canada, and then we'll get into what's going on there, and let the audience and me kind of figure out if that's a proxy for trucks or not.
Yeah. I mean, the transit bus market is very unique, right? I mean, it's got a different compared to trucks, right? I mean, people who own trucks are using it for work and to make money, right, and to move goods. The transit industry is largely subsidized by the federal government and state and local governments. Their mission is to move people, right, and move people safely. But what I found out in the transit market is that, they were the benefactor of a lot of innovative early stage federal funding programs like the National Fuel Cell Bus Program, which was out of the FTA. Yes, I think the transit market has been ahead of the truck market in terms of trying out new technologies, whether it's automated vehicles, autonomous vehicles, or fuel cell buses, or even hybrids, right? And part of that was having the federal dollars behind it.
Yeah.
But then again, buses are much different, right? They come home every night. They tend to go maybe 150 to 200 miles max a day, right? This is a different duty cycle. There's different OEMs involved, different supply chain. While the technology might be adaptable, there's really different use cases.
Sure. Well, a couple of thoughts there. I mean, first of all, transit bus moving people, they're doing the more with less just by itself, right? So if you can avoid 30 cars driving somewhere and have 30 people on a transit bus, you're saving a lot of emissions and congestion and so forth. But I really want to, and so that's however we can make that better and easier. So as you look at alternative fuels, whether it's battery electric, natural gas, hybridization, hydrogen, all those, if that makes for a better bus and more people wanting to be on it, you get double benefits. You get the powertrain being cleaner, also moving a lot of people. And with the pandemic and some other things, we're not time to get into all of the mass transit, situation. Right. But it does seem though that 150 to 250 miles, some of the work that we've been doing at NACFE and RMI, a lot more trucks doing heavy trucks doing lower miles than many of us thought. We all kind of had this thought that they're on the highway doing 400, 500, 600 miles a day. And the numbers tell us otherwise, John. So I think we're a little more, at least the early electric tractors are more like buses than we want to admit in the trucking market. So kind of walk us through the alternative fuels that are being looked at in this, highly subsidized sector. But am I right? I mean, you kind of, the industry kind of went natural gas for a while and hybrids, maybe diesel hybrids, natural gas hybrids, and then full battery electric. And now I'm understanding a lot of hydrogen fuel cell discussions around transit. So walk us through the last 10 or 20 years. Where are we now? And where do you think we're going with alternative powertrains? And because it seems like it's just one after the next and not really finding the right solution just yet. Am I wrong there, John, or am I right?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of truth there. I mean, going back 15, 20 years, right? CNG, compressed natural gas, certainly found its foothold within the transit market, right? Southern California, Pennsylvania, there's pockets, Texas, pockets of where, the investment was made in the infrastructure and the fueling systems and all the upgrades to the garages and whatnot, the depots. And those fleets still exist today, but it's sort of flattened out. Same thing with hybrids, kind of came on with a flurry. A little bit different with the hybrid market where initially was focused on the powertrain and then electrification kind of creeped across the bus. We started doing things like electric power steering and electrifying accessories and turning the engine off. And we're still seeing that iteration. We're really getting a lot of interest around our geofencing capabilities. So basically, you have a hybrid bus that's a part-time electric bus, right? It shuts its motor off and can travel certain distances designated by the fleet. So you have a part-time electric bus running around, accumulating, a fair amount of electric drive miles. And so, in the last few years, we've seen battery buses really, take off. And again, thanks in part to a pretty good chunk of federal dollars, coming into the market. And then, like you mentioned, fuel cell. Just recently, about a week or two ago, the FTA released their federal, what they call low and no emission program funding, which has been a big catalyst in getting these technologies out. We've actually seen over the last 3 years of doubling from year to year of the number of fuel cell buses. Of course, one of the hampering factors to rolling out fuel cell buses is the infrastructure. So we're in that kind of chicken and egg thing. Like the buses are coming there and the technology has been proven. We just heard last week, the first of the massive hydrogen hub investments from the federal government. And really, I think it was California's hydrogen hub program, announced like this is where the money's going. These are the companies and the cities that'll be rolling it out. So it feels like hydrogen's starting to have its day. And fortunate for us, we play on both battery electric, fuel cell electric, and hybrid electric platforms.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's times where I think we cannot handle all these different systems for market sizes that are pretty low. Mm-hmm. And transit's clearly a kind of a low scale market. And then when you get into trucking, you got vocational trucks and dump trucks and mixers that really very few built a year, and building up though into some of the higher volume ones with heavy duty tractors on the road and box trucks and so forth. But I think, it's our jobs to figure out and look at all the alternatives and figure out which ones are placed in are best in which, let the sort of the scaling and standardization and commonality work its way through the market. But it makes engineering groups bigger, right? If you got to be designing and studying more solutions, and then the marketing and salespeople figuring out which solution's right. And you're kind of in that final piece, right? So when a transit authority talks to you about what they're going to buy next, I mean, what's that conversation like?
Yeah, it's funny, Mike, because there's huge agencies like New York City's MTA or Toronto, and then there's the whole gamut in between, down to a bus fleet that has a dozen or 20 buses. That's part of my job, by the way. In the last in 16 years, I've been interfacing with end customers and trying to understand and learn what they're facing with. And their prime job is to move people, right? So sometimes you hear, well, I'm not in the market of making hydrogen, right? And then you have some fleets that want to incorporate all that and do microgrid. You really start having to understand, each fleet on its own, because they're all grasping with funding and space. Again, MTA is a great example, right? Have you ever been in an MTA garage in New York City? They're pretty tight, in terms of how they pack their buses. So, space could be an issue at one agency and maybe not an issue at another. So while they're all struggling and trying to understand, paths, where BAE really comes into play is we've developed a modular architecture where we can accommodate different platforms.
Oh, there you go. Good.
We're agnostic, whether it's a fuel cell or a battery or a hybrid. Even getting down to accessory electrification, we can add or subtract capability using our modular configurations to accommodate the needs of the vehicle.
I've always been impressed with BAE Systems, technical capability and so forth, and always concerned about the fact that you're coming out of, defense and highly subsidized areas around, cost and some of those things. But always been impressed with how you approach the commercial business in a way that, is still very TCO value focused. You're not trying to push, high cost technologies in where they're not creating value. So, now I think what transit and what North American commercial trucks are going through is very similar. How do you take advantage of all of these different solutions? And it's not simple. I mean, we thought battery electric cars were going to just dominate. And I think, the hydrogen fuel cell cars days might be over, but hybrid and, plug-in hybrid is, still a big part of this to give the flexibility. So it's the one size fits all. And I guess I kind of concludes this portion of our time together around gas and diesel. Days are numbered, but the solutions are going to be many, and we just got to figure out what's right one, what can we afford to scale, and all that kind of stuff. Really scary, but interesting times for people like us to help the industry figure it out, right?
Yeah, I think, again, culminating, years of patents and, experiences in the field and feedback. And, by the way, Mike, you really are an advocate for voice of the customer. And I think we are as well. Rolling all that into our product line. I mean, I think it all comes down to trying to keep it as simple as possible, right?
Yeah.
Let companies like BAE Systems manage the technology and what's available, and silicon carbide switches and GaN switches and all the technology that goes into it. Let us handle that. Our solutions are designed to be user friendly, right? Easy to run reports and diagnostics. And again, this is over years of feedback. And then what we do is when we feel the product, we support it. So, we're always a phone call or elbow to elbow, in the garage, working with technicians, helping them troubleshoot and understand our systems as well as we did.
So that does bring me to something I wanted to talk to you about, and that is voice of the customer. So, one of the things that NACFE just recently completed was voice of the customer work with BAE Systems and Eaton on a simplified battery electric truck. It was pretty exciting time. We met in Marshall, Michigan. We brought fleets in on one day, truck OEMs on the second day, and on the third day had some media there walking through the same with each group, what's going on electric trucks, what's the pain points, what are some of the big challenges, and then, presenting some work that Eaton and BAE's done on how to create a product that mitigates some of those problems. And man, it was so much fun, John. I know you couldn't join us, but it was some of the other folks. But and it's similar to some work that we did together 10 years ago or so, up in New York with some end users. Well, dig into that a little deeper. What's important? And I think coming from BAE Systems with a lot of these technologies and patents, as you described it, in your back pocket, and then being very open with hearing from the customers about what's going on. Why is that important in your mind, not only for BAE, but for anybody doing product development? And sort of what's the best practices around those in your mind?
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't make it up to Michigan. I heard it was a good event. I knew you both together. I think if you think about what the work we're doing with Eaton, you have two technology companies coming together to bring a product to market. Sometimes you can become very insular, right? And you listen to your own engineers, and this is what the product is supposed to do, and this is what it is doing. And at BAE Systems, we make it a focused effort to continuously pull in outsiders, right, and get feedback and understand, what their on the ground needs are, what they needed to do, how long they needed to last, right? A lot of our effort is around, developing products that last the lifetime of the vehicle, and just getting that feedback, and using, third-party consultants like yourself, right? Make sure it's independent, right? And so we get the raw, the good, bad, and ugly in terms of true voice of the customer and different perspectives, right? From fleets and from vehicle OEMs. We've been doing that in the bus market. One example, just in the last 2 years, we had a customer, we were bringing our new inverters to market, and they said, gee, it'd be great if there was a port at this, propulsion inverter that could check for voltage. So before my techs start pulling cables and all these orange wires, right, they can verify that there's no voltage at the system level. It's basically a safety port. And we said, that sounds like a great idea, something that other people would ask for. So we incorporated that, and now it's a standard feature on all our inverters, right? It's a high voltage check port. So before you start doing maintenance, right, you check one last time to make sure there's the absence of voltage. So it's a continuous process, and the events where we actually have formal voice of the customer are great, but it's also something we gather and collect throughout.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to bring up here, because it's just you kind of said it in good. One of the challenges is, engineers provide people like us, John, solutions to customers' problems, and then we got to go sell it. And usually the engineers say, well, tell them the kilowatt hour per day per this, that, and the other is, 22% better than. It's like no customer talks like that. They want their own problem solved. And so it's always a challenge taking what the engineers, even if it's like an incredibly successful solution to a customer's problems, and turn it into language that the customer can understand and help implement into their operations. Well, I submit if you do voice a customer, sometimes unfortunately it's like 2 or 3 years before you get the product to go to market. But if you do voice a customer well and include those development people and engineers in hearing from the customer as to what they want, then that's really a script for then turning around and selling them the technical capabilities of the solution, because you can't tell a customer what an engineer told you the product does. I'm being a little blunt there, but it can be really helpful if it's done well.
Well, there's nothing more powerful than, hey, you asked for this and it took me a year, but here it is, right? Or you asked for this feature or this collection of data or this capability, right? And we heard you, and here it is in the flesh, right? I think it provides a sense of ownership. It shows the collaboration. It also shows a dedication, right, to meet the needs of customers. And there's a lot of gratitude that I think felt when fleets, OEMs, and end fleets, believe that their opinions and their needs have been heard, and they see the results.
Great point. So we're out of time, John. This always goes really fast, but you're in the weeds right now. I got one more question. You're in the weeds right now with a pretty demanding transit bus market that's more alike trucks than I think we want to admit in trucking. So you're out there talking about these different powertrain solutions, and it's one of the NACFE calls it the messy middle of different technologies, and but you're living it every day. So there's people listening to this that could really use your insight, John. So tell us how do you approach it? What's important, and what would be your advice to all of us trying to make it happen in trucking?
I'd say keep your eyes open. Just be very open-minded. Right, there are a lot of technologies available. There are a lot of experts and different ways to go after new products and new propulsion systems. There are a few that have been around the block. I mean, BAE Systems is one of them. Keep asking questions. Right. Nobody's an expert. Even you, Mike. You're a complete expert, I can say. I mean, there's a lot of smart people in the industry. Again, I was a history major that was converted into a Navy engineer, and I'm still learning something every day. And I ask a lot of questions. So, it is a messy metal. There's a lot of options. Just inform yourself the best you can is my most practical advice.
Well, thank you so much, John. Hey, it's great having you as a friend, and we'll keep having these discussions. This one just happens to be available for others to listen to. So have a great week. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Mike, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you so much. Saddle ready for me.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.